Movies are a hell of a thing, a piece of media that can uplift us, give us feelings of nostalgia, love, compassion, hope, excitement, or in this case, existential dread, depression and anxiety. Recently I've been thinking about great films that have had a lasting impact on me, and while there are many that instantly come to mind, some of them being on my wall back there, I find that movies which remind me how grim and ugly the world around me is usually have the most staying power, so much so that I have no desire or even outright refuse to watch them again, as one viewing is already enough, despite how amazing and effective their messaging may be. Today I've compiled a list of ominous flicks that will make you question why you watch them, that will make you think out loud saying, what the fuck did I just watch? Without further ado, here are 5 disturbing movies you won't want to rewatch, in no particular order. Starting with number 1, Murdered by My Boyfriend.
This is the end of my story. The journey here was not straightforward. It began when I fell in love. When the only future I could imagine was happy.
Murdered by My Boyfriend is a fact-based drama detailing the story of a victim of abuse, Ashley, by her controlling boyfriend Reese. It was actually based on a real-life instance of domestic abuse, with the victim's family asking the producers to keep the names different. Now, I remember watching this film years ago in secondary school. It was in a sociology class. You see, our teacher would often play films for us as a substitute for teaching, and that was when she actually showed up to do a job. But I digress. The reason I bring this up is because I can't think of a better environment to have watched that film in. If there's one word to describe this film, it would be frustrating. Watching the events unfold from an outside perspective, the warning signs that Reese is an abusive piece of shit can seem so obvious, and the character's choices can seem so backwards and confusing. Even during the screening in class, I remember there were people yelling, "What is she thinking, man?" and "Are you actually dumb?" Which is a bit rude, but also understandable from our point of view. However, if you put yourself in Ashley's shoes, her choices start to make more sense. When we are introduced to Reese, he seems likeable and laid back. It's only as the film progresses we start to see the violent, evil side rear its ugly head, which gradually increases as he starts worming his way into her life. Reese's duality is portrayed well throughout the movie, with shots of the actor covered in darkness indicating there's more to him than we initially see on the surface. The producer's aim was to educate teenage youth on domestic abuse, and director Paul Andrew Williams achieved that with flying colours. Despite the sensitive subject matter, I believe it's essential viewing, especially if you want to be educated on how abuse manifests and can quickly grow out of control. Number 2, Watership Down.
Couldn't get out. There was a strange sound. Hissing. The air turned bad. Runs blocked with dead bodies. We couldn't get out.
Watership Down is the kind of movie that sticks with you forever and doesn't truly ever leave your brain, no matter how much you've moved on. Especially if you watched it at an early age like I did. On the surface it looks like your average old animated movie aimed towards children, featuring cute bunnies going on adventures. Yippee! That's what deceived parents all across the world into letting their kids watch this, including mine. In reality, you're in for a realistic and brutal depiction of a group of rabbits struggling to find a new home that pulls no punches. It's an admittedly hard movie to talk about personally, as it's the one entry I haven't watched in the longest time. As I said, I watched it at an early age. In summary, it's about 2 blood-related rabbits, Hazel and Fiver. One day, Fiver gets a terrifying vision of their burrow being destroyed. After telling Hazel, both brothers decide to tell the chief about Hazel's vision and the imminent destruction of the burrow. The chief, of course, doesn't give 2 shits about what they have to say and promptly ignores them. So they go off to convince the other rabbits and manage to gain a few followers. From there they go on a journey to find a new home in a place called Watership Down, hence the title. You're probably thinking, pretty simple premise. And you'd be right. What made this film stand out from other generic kids movies is the emphasis on violence and weird dive into spirituality. That scene I showed you prior to this entry is the one I remember most. It gave me haunting nightmares for years. And even still I sometimes think absent-mindedly about how haunting and terrifying that part of the movie was. But it's not just that, there are many other examples of rabbits facing deadly scenarios which either leave them scarred and traumatised, or costs them their life entirely. The author of the book, Richard Adams, doesn't dance around the idea of death like so many other examples of children's media, but confronts it head on, exposing just how fragile life can be, especially fitting for a group of rabbits. When it comes to spirituality, I can't say I remember too much about how this movie explored that subject. I mainly bring it up because of the epilogue of the film, where the animation changes once Hazel passes away, depicting his ascent to heaven, or some other kind of plane of existence, I'm not really sure. Again, another sequence of animation that really stuck with me, not that I understood what the hell was going on, but still. As for its quality, I can't really speak on it. 7-year-old me didn't look at media with a critical eye like I do now, or at least how I try to do now. From what I've seen, the consensus seems to be that the movie is a solid adaptation of the book, with some shortcomings when it comes to character development, among other aspects, due to it being a film and having to skip over some details of the book to save time. Should you let your kids watch the movie? Well, that's for you to decide. Number 3, happiness.
Would you ever fuck me?
No. I jerk off instead.
This was without a doubt the hardest movie I've ever had to watch, and the most recent. It was this film that actually sparked the idea for this list, as it made me think on other disturbing media I'd seen throughout the years. And let me tell you, this is definitely up there as one of the most depraved. Yet, in saying that, it's an excellent movie, as negative as I make it sound. I remember hopping onto Letterboxd after watching this movie to make a note of it in my diary, like as I normally would do. I signed in, searched the movie, went to log and give it a score, and I kind of just sat there thinking. In the end, I didn't even give it any arbitrary stars. On the one hand, I hated this movie for making me retch and exposing me to intimate moments between various characters I really had no business viewing, as well as making me feel sympathy for the most depraved people. On the other hand, I loved how effectively it made me feel that way, as odd as that sounds, and how disgusting yet completely real and honest the characters in the movie are portrayed, despite their departure from the societal norms that we've created. So what's the plot of this flick? Well, happiness gives us a window into a cluster of different people's lives, all seeking the same thing. Love. Not in a romantic, Titanic sort of way, more in the, how do I put it? Getting your jollies off sort of way. All of these lonely individuals somehow intersect and intertwine with each other. There's no protagonist in happiness, only people. Even the poster depicts this theme, with all the characters in the film strewn about randomly in a crowd. Nothing particularly eye-catching about any one of them, which I think is the point of the movie. We get a preview of each of these characters' lives as they seek out love and sexual gratification, and despite how hideous and unwatchable it can get, at the end of the day, to everyone else, even to each other, they seem like average, ordinary people. As I've stated, there are a variety of characters in this movie, whether it's a 12-year-old boy trying to bust his nut for the first time, or a lonely single dude threatening women over the phone. The one who had the most impact on me though was Bill Maplewood, a man who seems to have everything. A well-paying job, wife, kids, a nice house. But as a matter of fact, he's the most reprehensible of them all. The best way I can describe him is by going on his villain's wiki. Hobbies: spending time with his son Billy, reading news articles, working from home. Damn, sounds like a wholesome guy. I don't see the problem with... Oh. Despite his sickening nature, during the scene I showed you before this entry, I almost cried. Yeah, he's a monster who deserves the worst, but it was soul-crushing watching him recognise how much of a disgrace he is, and admitting it straight to his son's face. Jesus. Talk about traumatising. Number 4, Freds. So about happiness being the hardest movie I've ever had to watch? Yeah, this is a close second. Though it's extremely difficult to watch for different reasons. Happiness was packed to the brim with depraved and morally egregious characters that made it hard to stomach. Whereas Freds filled me with an inescapable terror and despair as it slowly sank me deeper and deeper into like a sort of docile depression as the film ran its course. It's possible that you actually might have heard of this entry before. Despite being a relatively unknown movie, it has recently wiggled its way back into the modern zeitgeist, with people discussing it all over social media and even here on YouTube. That's how I ended up finding out about the movie. I watched a YouTube video describing how it was one of the most disturbing movies of all time, and of course it piqued my interest. Curiosity killed the cat and all that. Essentially, the film depicts a hypothetical nuclear bombing of Sheffield during the Cold War, where tensions between NATO and the Soviet Union were at its peak. Half of the film takes place just before the bombs drop. This half is extremely agonising to sit through. I mean, going into this movie, you already know what's going to happen. You already know the horrifying imminent fate that is about to befall Sheffield and its residents. But it takes so long to get there. With each minute that passes, you know the inevitable is just getting closer and closer. One thing I noticed throughout this first section was the radio. It's constantly on, whether it's in the forefront with all the characters paying close attention to it, or in the background being drowned out by whatever the people are up to. This tiny, slim little detail actually adds tremendously to the film. It further emphasises the inevitable and keeps you on your toes the whole way through. Some of the characters take the potential of the nuclear threat seriously, building shelters, constantly listening to the radio, that sort of thing. Others aren't nearly as concerned. Unfortunately, for all the parties, there is no good outcome. So we get to see the sheer force of nature that is the nuclear bomb, burning everything to ash, destroying buildings, creating endless clusters of smoke. Even the people that somehow survived are left with scars, cataracts, and ridden with cancer. Their very bodies altered by the radiation. 10 years later, the effects of the bombs are still crippling. The population dropping to medieval levels, struggling to harvest crops, as well as giving birth to mentally and physically impaired children. Overall, the movie does an exceptional job at depicting the devastation and ruin caused by nuclear weapons, and is a haunting reminder of what could have been, or what could be. Number 5, Requiem for a Dream.
What have I got, Harry? Why should I even make the bed or wash the dishes? I do them. But why should I? I'm alone.
This is another movie that captured my interest purely out of Morbius. Fuck. I almost said Morbius. God damn you, Jared Leto! This is another movie that captured my interest purely out of morbid curiosity. After hearing about it apparently containing disturbing themes and imagery. At first, I was doubtful I was even going to like the flick to begin with. I'm not really a person that does drugs, so I figured it might not connect to me in the same way it would like a user or former addict. Despite this, I still trotted forward and watched it. Even though it didn't hit home with me personally, the messaging and powerful storytelling still had an impact. Requiem for a Dream is about two concurrent stories that involve characters using drugs to achieve or get closer to their dreams. On one side you have Harry, Marion and Tyrone, who come together to deal heroin in order to gain enough funds to actually live out their dreams. Harry and Marion want to open a clothing store using Marion's designs, whereas Tyrone wishes to escape from his shitty neighbourhood. On the other side you've got Harry's mom Sarah, who gets invited to come on a television show. She wants to wear this red dress that she wore at Harry's graduation, but realises she can't actually fit into it. To help with this dilemma, she turns to diet pills, in hopes of losing weight as fast as possible. Speedrunning that shit. I think this film really stands out specifically because of these two concurrent stories. There are plenty of movies about the dangers of drug use, depicting very explicitly the disastrous effects of stereotypical drugs like cocaine and heroin, for example. When I say stereotypical drugs, I mean the kind of drugs that you'd think of when someone says to you the word drugs or brings up the subject. However, I'm willing to bet that none of us think of diet pills when someone brings up drugs, or put it anywhere near the same category as the ones I mentioned, despite both causing majorly unhealthy outcomes, to say the least. It really gets you thinking about what actually is a drug, or what would we categorise as a drug. Thoughts that are pretty common with people that are addicted to other supplements like cigarettes, alcohol, or hell, I'll say it, even food. At the end of the day, it's a film that really gets you questioning how we categorise drugs and treat them so differently from one another, despite both causing life-changing harm. And that concludes my list. I don't know if I ever want to go to this level of disturbing again, damn. It was really hard writing this list, not only because of the dark subjects and themes, but also because I was mainly relying on memory. As I stated earlier, these are movies that I've only watched once, and have no desire to watch again. So I intend to keep it that way, for as long as possible. Anyways, thanks for sticking with it. I only just started uploading again recently, so I'm still experimenting, seeing what actually sticks and what doesn't. But yeah, like if you liked, dislike if you disliked, and I'll see you guys next time.